This video will be on how to harmonize a Sax Soli at an intermediate level. My buddy Ross composed this melody over the changes for grooving high. It has some classic bebop techniques, such as use of arpeggios, sequences, and chromatic runs. Sax Solis are fun to write. They are typically done with all of the saxes playing the same rhythm and following the melody in parallel motion. It creates a fun, thickened line, which sounds great in a jazz setting. That is the texture that I'll mostly stick to for this example. Okay, let's get straight into it. In a Sax Soli, it's typical to double the melody an octave below with the baritone sax, or sometimes the second tenor sax. As there are usually 5 saxes in a section, that leaves us with 4-part harmony for the Soli. As this is an intermediate level video, we'll sometimes use 5-part harmony in certain points for effect. I'll talk about them when they arise. When the 5th is on the melody, we'll place a 3rd below, and then either a root or a 9th, depending on the sound you want, and then the 7th. I'll try this one with the 7th, and this one with the root note. When the melody is the root note, we have a couple of options. We can place the 7th, 5th, and 3rd below, but now we have a minor second between the melody and the next note down. This is usually too dissonant, so I'll use a major 6th instead. So now we have a 6th, 5th, and 3rd. When the 3rd is in the melody, we can place a root, 7th, and 5th below. Here we have another minor second, but because it's not on the top next to the melody, it's completely fine. Here's another 5th. I'll do it the same as before. And a 3rd, the root below, and 7th, and then 5th. When the 7th is on the melody, we can place a 5th, 3rd, and either the 9th or root below. I'll do this one with the root note. Now there are only a few notes left in the phrase. This C, which is the 6th, this chromatic run, and this chromatic approach note. Let's start with the C, the 6th. It's typical to harmonize this note with chord tones, which I could do, but have a look at what happens. I'll put in a 3rd, a root, and a 7th. The second alto and first tenor would be repeating their notes in the next chord. Now this is totally allowed, but when the music is as fast as this, it's nice for the player to play a more swinging line by changing their pitch here. If they play the same note in a row, their articulation will be different to the other saxes. So I like to look at the voicings around the chord and adjust it so that everyone gets a part that moves and swings. I'm going to shift the 3rd up to a 4th or 11th, and the root up to a 9th. Now you might say, now you've got an F minor 7 chord in that bar of E flat. But I think at this tempo, it's totally fine and preferable with the better voice leading. You're going to hear it in a moment, so you can judge for yourself. For the chromatic notes, I'll do a similar thing where I look at the next important moment or target chord, and just make sure each part follows chromatically to that point. Here is what the first 2 bars sound like. Now at the start of the 3rd bar, there is a B flat melody note on the A minor 7 chord. You often see this sort of thing in bebop. The melody still makes sense, as the conclusion of the phrase is nicely inside the harmony. When you get a note like this, a diminished chord is often a really good option, and it so happens that a diminished chord from this pitch is the top part of an A7 flat 9. So that makes sense. We have just essentially changed the A minor 7 to an A7 flat 9. And I'll do this for the other B flats in the phrase too. So let's move on to the last note of the phrase, where we want a strong D7. It looks like a nice opportunity for some 5-part harmony. I'm going to place the root D in the baritone sax with a flat 9th, 7th, and 5th. That's a nice strong end to the phrase. The previous chord has a 7th in the melody, so we'll place a 5th, 3rd, and flat 9th below. I'll look at this A melody note next. Can you see what's going to happen here? If I treat this as the root of A minor 7, I'll get into the repeated notes again. I'll show you what I mean. Here is the 7th, which is okay as it's a major second from the melody, a 5th, and a 3rd. We have a bunch of repeated notes. So I'm actually going to treat the chord as a D7. This can be a good option to get you out of these tricky situations. There's no reason you can't use a chord slightly earlier or later than it's written. So as a 5th of D7, I can place a 3rd, root, and 7th. That works well. And now I can fill in this inner harmony on the C. Now just for fun, because this is an intermediate level video, I'll make this A an A flat. So we get a D7 flat 5. I think that is a nice tasty line for the second alto sax. Once you have your phrase working, it's okay to adjust the chords to taste. Here's what the first 3 bars sound like. I'll speed up a bit now, as it's a similar process for the rest of the Sax Soli. In bars 5 and 6 we have an arpeggio and a scale passage. Let's fill in the chord tones first. That just leaves the 2 Cs and an F sharp to do. For this C, I'll keep the same voicing shape. You can see how that leaves each player with a nice line. For the F sharp, I'll just do the chromatic step again. This C is a little different, as its length makes it a more important note in the melody. Let's try it as a diminished chord again, as the phrase will land securely in the following bar. Yes, that works well. In bar 4, we can fill in this chord as the A minor 7, and this one is a D7 flat 9. For the pickup to bar 5, I could use a chromatic step or a diminished chord. It's so quick that either one would work. I'll use a diminished chord again. Okay, on to bar 7. Let's do the important notes first. This F sharp note is really important, as it's the end of the phrase, even though it's the sharp 11 of the chord. In school, I would have been taught to harmonize this chromatically, as it's not in the C7 chord, but I think that is bullshit. It's crying out to be a strong C7 chord, so I'll place a 9th, a 7th, a 3rd, and a 5th. It's another 5-note chord. Using 5-part harmony adds just a little extra richness after all of the flowing lines. And the other notes are similar to before. I'll place an early C7 flat 9 here, with the 3rd flat 9 and 7th, which coincidentally is another diminished chord. And on these A pitches, I'll place a G minor 9 with a 7th, 5th and 3rd. On this chord, I'll make an adjustment so the second tenor player doesn't need to play the same note in a row. And I'll place a G minor 7 under this B flat with the root, 7th and 5th. For a change after all the rich harmony, I'll have this arpeggio in unison in octaves, landing on a rich 5-part C7 flat 9. Those are the basics of the process for a Sax Soli intermediate level. I'll speed up a little more now and talk about some other little moments. This longer phrase has a couple of challenging moments. Let's take on the important or target chords first. On beat 1 here, I'll place an F9, and the other interesting moment is this G flat on the B flat 7 chord. Even though this is a chromatic note, I'm going to treat it as a target chord and make it a B flat 7 augmented. Why do this, you ask? I feel like the G flat is an important point in the melody, as it lands on beat 3 and is intentionally meant to stick out. So I'll put in a 3rd, 9th and a flat 7 to make a B flat 7 augmented chord. Now I'll fill in some of the other chord tones. For this chromatic run into the F sharp, I'll use diminished chords, and the F sharp diminished chord is the top part of an F7 flat 9, so it works out well. Now I'll deal with some of the passing tones. For this D, I can place in the 2 chord to the 5, which is a C minor 7. Here's the 7th, 5th, and 3rd. That makes a C minor 9. Oops, I forgot these chord tones. Now for this B flat, we're heading into an E flat 2-5, so I'll just use a diatonic E flat chord. You'll notice that I'm quite happy to leave the root notes to the bass player. For this G, I'll harmonize it as a F minor 9. Again, I've left the root note to the bass player. On these pitches, I'll just use chromatic approach chords, making sure each part just takes a step to the next chord. Why would I use a chromatic approach on a chord tone? That's just to avoid repeated notes in the same part again. If this last 8th note of the bar were a F7, we'd have a repeating E flat in C. There, with the chromatic approach tones, it works well. To change up the texture, I'll have these low notes as unison and octaves again, so the end of the phrase is a surprise with a rich texture. I'll put in a F minor 7. And I see a chance to have a nice strong chord here at the end of the phrase, so I'll place a G on the bottom of this chord too. This is a slightly different way of working, where I'm looking at the voice leading instead of just the chordal information. Give it a try. Now to make this chord really rich, I'll make it a 5-part chord by making this an A natural, which makes this chord an F7 sharp 9. That should be a nice effect. This chord where I have a G on the bottom, with a C flat or B in the melody, I'll try and fill it in with a G 9 chord. Let's hear what that sounds like. The contrary motion at the end of the phrase sounds really solid and rich. In the following bars, there's a great sequence. I'll highlight this by using some unison octaves again. The leap upwards are in unison, and then I'll have the other saxes join in dramatically to thicken the texture. I'm following the same rules of harmony, it's just that the saxes are entering later. I put a bracket around the A flat because it's actually a mistake, but I had sent the parts like that to Patricio. Luckily he's an awesome sax player and could get through it anyway. I'll do the same texture for the next 2 bars. In this part, I had to use a lot of diminished chords to get out of some of the sticky situations. But I make sure to end the phrase on a strong E7. Hey, if you're really into this stuff and want to take a deep dive, you'll enjoy my intermediate workbook, which I've uploaded to my Ko-fi page. It's a collection of ideas and teachings that I've condensed from studying Gil and Bach over the years. It has heaps of exercises and examples of voicings, 5-part harmony, and how to harmonize passages in a Soli type of texture. It even has the answers in the back. The link is in the description. Okay, let's go on with the Sax Soli. Then the start of the head is repeated again until the second time bar. The head ends with a beboppy phrase containing some lovely chromatic steps and arpeggios. Most of all of this melody can be filled in with the assigned chord. Then I'll fill in the chromatic steps. And I'll use a diminished chord to connect this scale passage and this flat 9. And that's it. Thanks so much to my mate Ross for this awesome melody. It was a real treat to work on. And thanks so much to Patricio for the awesome sax playing, and Gabriel for the bass playing. Please check out their channels, they do great work. And here's the whole head.